I'm Michael Roberts, the William H. Lawrence Professor of Finance at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. I'm joined today by Ganesh Iyer, the President of Intuitive Operations and Automation at Cognizant. Ganesh, welcome.
Thank you, Michael.
I'd like to discuss how business leaders can confront the challenges of growth. But before doing so, let me provide a little bit of context and some boundaries for our discussion. So one, inflation is down from a 40-year high and slowing, but remains an ongoing concern, due in part to a tight labor market that stays strong in spite of all the layoffs we've seen from the tech sector. Two, the Fed's been hiking interest rates aggressively, though slowing more recently. Still, they're hawkish, and the bond market is expecting interest rates to increase at a reasonable clip for the foreseeable future. And finally, if we wrap all this up, we've got a number of concerns about the economy, with economists largely split in terms of their view on whether or not we're going to see a soft landing and quick recovery, or we're going to see a hard landing and a recession. If I was forced to distill this environment into one word other than confusing, it would be uncertain. And that's a characterization that I think is consistent with recent remarks by Larry Summers and Mohamed El-Erian. So with that backdrop, let me ask you, what are you seeing in the market from your conversations with clients as well as other business executives regarding how they're dealing or grappling with this uncertain and fast-paced environment that really is the new reality?
Yeah, I've been in this industry for 37 years, and I have seen economic uncertainty play out many times. But this time, I don't know whether it is, in many ways it's different. The first difference is that they are dealing with economic uncertainty, simultaneously tectonic shift in business models. Some people call it digital era, some people call it experience era, whatever name you want to give. That's not slowing down. So they have to deal with minimum two variables. One is how can they continue the journey of transformation and yet do belt tightening to get ready for economic uncertainty. So I'm clearly seeing signs, customers going back to the old word, or shall I say the fashion, let's cut costs. But they're not looking at cutting costs the traditional way. They are saying cut costs, but also bring in transformation. So it's not a unidimensional challenge that they are faced with. There are two variables at minimum, which is very different compared to what I have seen before.
There's a lot in there. So let me start with the belt tightening, which really goes to a broader issue of P&L health. And I'll use inflation as a sort of an illustrative vehicle of the uncertainty we're grappling with now. Right, when we think about it from a business perspective, inflation is affecting all forms of prices, be it input, output. And the challenge I see in speaking with executives, as I'm sure you do, is, do we pass these costs on to consumers? To what extent? Do we internalize them? Do we force them upon our suppliers insofar as that's possible? So what I'd like to try and understand now is how business process services and automation can help mitigate price pressure on both fronts, the input and the output, to come back to ensuring firms have a healthy P&L with margins and profitability.
Yeah, the word business process means many things to many people. So let me first define what I mean by business process. What sits between the systems, the so-called tech systems, and what the customer experiences, that's the process. Or I can say business outcome and system, whatever sits in between is business process. So it's probably the most essential element in any business enterprise to design. And probably the area which hasn't got the attention it deserves. Because designing the process to deliver experience is a very specialized field, and I'm sure in your field you will come across this term, designing experience. So on top of it, now we have this word called automation. Only 7% of enterprises have embraced automation holistically. So 93% haven't. So there is tremendous potential to leverage automation. But it's not about spending more money. It's about your ability to sweat existing assets that you have. Because during belt tightening, you don't want to have more spending. So there is an opportunity to sweat your existing assets, leveraging automation, and cutting cost, delivering experience. So automation is a fantastic tool for that.
So that's really the perfect segue to something I've been wanting to talk to you about for a little while now. Automation, as you said, has been around for quite some time. It's not new. But my experience over just the last 3 years is that discussions among executives, certainly in my engagements as well as many of my colleagues, about automation has really ramped up over the last 3 years, perhaps sparked with the onset of COVID, but growing ever faster over time. And so when I have these discussions, I take the usual economics professor perspective. Okay, let's think about the cost-benefit trade-off here. I'd really love to get your thoughts on the simple taxonomy I bring to those discussions, if you don't mind, and get some of your feedback and nuances. Sure. So when I think about the pros, there, as you mentioned, the sort of obvious cost savings / belt tightening. But I always viewed automation as being much more than just a cost-saving mechanism, right? I think about lifting growth, increased revenues. That's coming from increases in productivity. I think about the increases in flexibility, the increasing value of the real options many companies hold, the increases in scalability. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the potential costs or cons of automation that I see, and this is really where I'd love to get your thoughts, being an expert on the subject. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is risk, both in terms of implementation and execution. And there was a wonderful analogy shared with me by an executive about the risk of automation. They drew an analogy to acquisitions, right? So in an acquisition, we see the rosy synergies and all the upside potential from cost savings and revenue growth. But the reality on the back end is often a little bit different in terms of the integration costs that are never fully understood before the deal is concluded. And so there's one, the risk side, but two, is it really a panacea, right? Or is there a specific time and place or company for which automation is particularly appropriate?
Yeah, so I think what's important is the world is now moving to, or has moved to cognitive automation. Earlier, the word was robotic process automation. And the latest buzzword is generative AI. So let's not go to generative AI yet. Do you have your data in place? If you have data in place, automation will give you not just the cost savings, but it will help you deliver experiences based on personas that you define, different stakeholders, be it employees, customers, or community at large. So automation has tremendous potential, but there are certain underlying elements that you have to have in place. And majority of companies have not gotten it together. They have invested in tools. And what has happened is we have to make it simpler. We have to demystify the term automation, bring it all together, help them leverage the existing assets. So almost a kind of orchestration that one has to do to make it easier for companies to leverage the power of automation. Now, talking about governance, in this world of AI, governance is extremely important. I remember the phrase which used to exist, to err is human, to completely screw it up, you need a computer. So in that sense, automation can actually multiply if you are making a mistake at much faster than human beings will do. So in that sense, for you to look at the algorithm and ensure there is proper governance is extremely important. And keeping inventory of all the automation elements that you have inserted in your system is also important, because it's almost like inventory management of what you have done. Because if you don't know, suddenly that knowledge would be lost and you wouldn't know what's happening in your systems. So tremendous potential, good return on investment, requires careful governance and requires some foundational work. But do we have a choice? Is an important question. Can you afford not to embrace automation? Can you stay away from this race? Can you face the new economic reality that is unfolding without leveraging automation? Can you continue to exist where you're not delivering and shaping experiences of different stakeholders? Those are the questions which business leaders must ask. And I mean, to me, the answer is obvious. If you want to be in the game, you have to be in the race to deliver experiences. And automation is a fantastic, if I may, the platform for you to enable that. It will also help you to do belt tightening, as what we were discussing. But that shouldn't be the main objective. The objective should be, get sharper, generate more revenue, generate greater experiences, able to attract, retain talent because they feel everybody is treated in a very unique fashion. And that's possible through automation as well.
Yeah, I really like the thought experiment you posed there, because one of the biggest challenges executives face when they are somewhat removed from sales, so think HR perhaps, or marketing, is justifying spend, because there isn't a direct line to revenue growth. It has to weave through other functional areas in the organization. And so I often suggest exactly what you just did to executives, which is to ask the question, well, what happens if we don't do this? Let's think about the logical thought process of where we will be in 1 to 5 years if we aren't on board with Project X, in this case, automation. And it becomes quickly apparent that the cost of not doing it far outweighs the cost of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a wonderful point.
So Michael, I'm quite keen to find out, in the context of economic uncertainty and the innovation that's taking place, I mean, explosive innovation, what kind of muscle are you building in your students? New kind of muscles. What are they demanding, in other words, as well?
Well, briefly, from their perspective, I think it's really how to incorporate an innovative mindset in everything they do. That is they're very much their culture. From my perspective, what I'm trying to get across to my students has changed over time, more in terms of emphasis than new concepts per se. In addition to tools and understanding of finance principles, we're emphasizing a bit more critical thinking and the application of the scientific method. While data and analytics has always been central to financial activities, I think the explosion of different types of data and the amount of data, as well as the new tools that have come about to take advantage of that data, have changed dramatically. And so the ability of students to look at a problem, a decision, and not be constrained to traditional data sources, to traditional analyses, is critical to their success in business going forward.
If I can chime in with an additional question, what kind of soft skills that you believe they need to have to tackle this new world beyond the technical skills of leveraging data and all those things? What kind of soft skills you believe we should be building in this generation and future generation.
So I'm glad you asked that, because it's very easy to look at a finance class, and I'll use mine as an example. I teach data science for finance, and immediately think quantitative, mathematical, technical. But one of the things, coming back to which muscles we're trying to develop, one of the things I try to convey to students is the importance of communication skills. It doesn't matter how elegant or informative your analysis is if you can't communicate it clearly to decision makers. And so what I like to think of myself as training in my class is a data translator, someone who can bridge the gap between the C-suite and technical data scientists, PhDs, who can speak comfortably to both groups so that decision makers can actually leverage the value of data and analytics that we've been discussing this whole time.
One of the analogies that I would like to draw from Formula One car racing is and this I learned recently and I just loved it. The winners there actually accelerate at the bend. Everybody accelerates in the straight, but the real good drivers, they are accelerating at the bend. So in some ways, the economic uncertainty that we are faced with, if you can compare it to the bend in the racetrack, this is the time I think companies can accelerate. And the question which you raised about data science, automation, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for companies to double down and say, I am that company which is going to accelerate at this bend and outrun my competition, increase the distance between me and my competitors, enhance the value to my customer segment, and of course, enhance the value to the talent that I have. Because the talent war, even though job losses you are seeing, the talent war for top talent hasn't gone away. I don't think it will ever go away because the rate at which innovation is coming, top talent would always be in demand. So the experience which you deliver to top talent, the environment that you provide, multi-generation workforce, what makes them excited is different for a different set of people. Your ability to handle this multi-rhythm becomes important. So in that sense, I see this economic uncertainty as an opportunity to leverage data, automation, your strategy to surge ahead and not look at it as a threat, but more as an opportunity.
No, I think that's a wonderful perspective because it's very easy to entrench in times of uncertainty, when in fact, looking at it from the investor side, the finance side, that is exactly the best time to make the best bets, where the opportunities are in some sense greatest. So I see that analogy very clearly. So let me, for just a moment, put on my CFO hat, just my academic CFO hat. So the interest rate increase we've seen over the last year means capital is incredibly costly now. And so when I speak with CFOs, right, that's what they see immediately. Money just got a lot more expensive. So that naturally translates over to the investment side, right? We've got a higher hurdle rate. Investments have to be more profitable to go through, but that also feeds into growth, which is ultimately what we're talking about here. And so I want to bring it back, that line of thinking, to business process services and start thinking about how that can help with financing costs, either directly or indirectly. How can we get more bang for our buck as a finance person or a financial executive in this current environment? And how does business process services help us do that?
So, one of the things which today's world facilitates is to, in a very automated fashion, provided you have fundamental systems in place, we can actually create a circuit diagram of your existing processes. Many times companies don't know what their existing process is. Where are the bottlenecks? The moment you're able to, in an automated fashion, you're able to see, oh, is that what is happening? A simple tweak in your process can start generating higher returns.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very, very quick and profitable step. Doesn't require tremendous amount of capital, and something which I would advise anybody, whether you're going to acquire a company, you're going to sell parts of your business, you're looking at massive transformation, getting the circuit diagram of your existing process gives you tremendous advantage. Then the next step is, once you have it, you can design your golden process. And when I say design, you design it with experience built in. So you know where you stand, you know where you want to go, then you can start the journey of going there. Very simple, if I may picture in anybody's mind, because if you know where you want to go, you also need to know where you stand, right? So in that sense, today the tools are enabling all of those. And for a CFO, if we have a proper conversation, I think CFO would be our biggest ally to undertake automation. Because the break-even on investment can happen within 9 months, within 6 months. So it's not, you don't have to leverage tremendous amount of capital to start the journey. And you can handle it in waves rather than trying to boil the ocean. In fact, I would recommend that you please handle it in waves. Don't do a 3-year project on automation, because there is no such thing as 3 years journey of automation. So I think CFOs should get interested in automation, should get into the world of automation. Because even the world of CFOs is changing, isn't it? The old world CFO is no more relevant. It's the strategic CFO who is more relevant in today's world. So in that sense, tech-savvy CFOs are required to some extent.
Yeah, no, I couldn't
Your
agree
views,
more.
I mean.
No, I couldn't agree more. The CFO today is unrecognizable relative to that 30, 40 years ago, whatever you may, right? We really think of the CFO as a strategic partner, as having a broad overview of the business and being on board with the strategic vision of the CEO, right? The job is really how can we help, putting myself in the place of the CFO temporarily, how can we help realize that vision and contribute to it? Let me go back to a couple things you just said, because I found them quite interesting. I couldn't help but think of a venture capitalist and startup companies when you were just now talking about automation, right? You talked about staged investment, not trying to boil the entire ocean at once. You talked about a short payback period, which though isn't necessarily the case in small startup companies, certainly rings true with most CFOs who are concerned on a first order basis about risk and how much capital we have on the line and for how long. So it's very fascinating to me to hear this description of automation, because on the one hand, you describe it as bringing so much flexibility and agility, if you will, to businesses. On the other hand, the manner in which companies can embrace it seems almost equally as flexible and agile. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I'm hoping you can help clarify something for me. Can you help me understand the difference between what I'll call traditional business processes and more modern business processes?
So the traditional business process tended to be very human heavy. And there are two categories of business process to begin with. One is so-called horizontal business process, finance and admin being one of them, HR, supply chain, procurement. They tend to be, little bit industry agnostic. I wouldn't say completely industry agnostic, but they are called horizontal business process. Then you have industry vertical business process. So if you take the world of life sciences, pharmacovigilance is a vertical business process, or clinical data management is a business process. So there is a stack of industry vertical business process. Now, industry vertical business process tends to align itself closer to the business manager, P&L owner, whereas the horizontal tends to align itself with the cost center side of the house. When you talk about modern business process, a lot of tech infusion takes place in the process. So it's not human heavy. It is actually human augmented and tech infused business process. But what is more important is it's aligned to the business objective of the company as an industry vertical process, delivering experiences and outcomes. And this is so exciting because when we are discussing with our customers, because we as a company are more focused on vertical processes, so it's exciting because their strategic discussions are reflected in our actions. So we are not far away from their strategy getting into reality. We are actually pacing, with them to deliver the strategy in business outcomes. And that's the distinction between human heavy versus tech infused. And then you make the distinction whether it's industry vertical business process or horizontal business process. So we are actually very, very fortunate because we specialize in industry vertical business process. We get to work with P&L owners. We focus on their strategy. We see how we can become true partners in delivering the outcome which they desire. So our team members are in conversation with P&L owners every day. So that's a huge education system for us as well.
Okay, so let me throw a little bit of a curveball at you, if you will,
Sure.
and keep in mind it's coming from someone with a finance background, so I want to make sure I get this right. But it's something I've noticed with many students coming from different backgrounds. How, if I bifurcate business models into two buckets, okay, and bear with me, digitally native businesses, and then businesses that are in the process of transitioning to digital. What do you see as differential responses across these two types of businesses to the uncertainty in the environment today, and how they address the pace of change that we're seeing?
So to begin with, let me keep the uncertainty portion away and share with you my experience with these two distinct set of companies. One thing which I admire in Bond Digital clients is they anticipate and respond, and they sense and respond much faster than others. So, and continuous innovation is in the culture of that company. So it's not seen as if, oh, it's extra work, let me focus on innovation. It's like everyday event in those companies. And even the word outsourcing, if you go back to the old era of outsourcing, people said, I want to focus on my core and non-core I outsource. Whereas Born Digital clients, their focus is how can I go to market faster? Who can help me reach to the market faster? And if I want to fail fast. So they are looking for somebody who brings in this element of acceleration. They are looking for somebody who can take them for global scale quickly, who can do it faster, and of course, they are also interested in doing it cheaper. So it's not as if they are not focused on finance or financial returns. But the greater focus is acceleration. Now, if you snap back to non-digital, or shall I say, the other set of companies, innovation is seen as a distinct activity. I mean, you were describing younger generation thinks of tech in very native terms, whereas a person of my age thinks of tech in daily life as an add-on, right? So these companies think of innovation as a separate function. They are trying to inject certain elements, but it almost requires a culture of experimentation that one has to create. One needs to learn to celebrate failures as much as celebrating successes. Because if you don't celebrate failures, you're not encouraging people to experiment. So those are the elements which one needs to think about. If you are trying to be digital, it's not just the injection of technology. It's not just the injection of automation. It's also about culturally embracing the new ethos, which prepares you for not just defending yourself, but to be surging ahead versus the competition. So that's kind of distinction. Now, you can overlay the economic uncertainty that's sitting on top, and you can start visualizing how they will act and react to the economic uncertainty that they are faced with, right? Will the culture of innovation go away in a Born Digital client? Or will you start cutting down on R&D expense, which is a separate line item in most of the companies during economic uncertainty? Those are the questions which you can kind of start pondering over. But the fundamental difference of continuous innovation, much higher clock speed, and this concept of partnering for acceleration are the attributes which I learned from Born Digital clients.
So let me push you a little bit further down that
Sure.
road, because every single class I've run with MBA students or executives, every private engagement I've ever had, seemingly, this challenge or this dichotomy in culture comes up. And what I mean by that is there's the digitally native businesses where R&D spend, that's the business model. Failure, that's the business model. Well, we fail because we learn, and then we spend more on R&D and we learn more, and that's the way, that's natural. It's the culture, as you said. The non-digitally native businesses, as we can call them for now, that is not the model. And so there is a very different mindset that is very hard to overcome. I think in part because they are tethered. I say this with much difficulty, tethered to financial performance, right? What I want to push you on is how can these non-digitally native businesses, for lack of a better term, begin to transition culturally as well as practically to a mindset that will enable them to embrace innovation and, positive failure, I'll call it.
See, I'm a product of a non-digital era myself.
Okay.
So this is of tremendous interest to me personally, beyond the sphere of work that I do as a professional. And one of the things which I find interesting for somebody who is not born digital, how do you embrace, is don't make your business to be a big ship. Instead, convert it into, hundreds of canoes, so that you are actually shielding. Suppose you have 100 canoes, and one of the canoes goes wrong. You're shielding the remaining 99 canoes. And when you create hundreds of canoes, you will have to create a culture of empowerment, experimentation, regardless. And when you do that, what it does is it creates the excitement. It starts attracting the talent, the new generation talent, because they love the fact that they are allowed to experiment. And there is no huge hierarchy as a result, because I think that the new generation doesn't identify itself with tall hierarchies. So one of the options is to see whether you want to remain a massive ship, or would you convert them into 100 canoes. Then you guide them through your strategy, your ethical values, your framework, but allow canoes to find their own speed. It's not necessary that you have to govern the speed. That's kind of my personal belief, and I hope in some ways the business that I run, I reflect that in the way I run my business.
Yeah, you're much better at a turn of the word than I am. I communicate a similar message to executives, which is to think of their company as a portfolio of projects. I like canoes much better. But as a portfolio of projects, right, much like a portfolio of any other investments, right, some succeed, some fail. So we get a little bit of cross-subsidization, we get diversification to mitigate risk. And so we can allow those seemingly riskier moonshot ideas to play out because they are offset or balanced by other core activities, safer revenue streams, more consistent, less volatile profits. So it dovetails very nicely, though spoken much more eloquently than the message I like to convey as well. So that's incredibly useful.
Well, so I hope that together we can continue to make this world a better place. Look forward to continuing the partnership with you, and I am truly thankful to you for the time that you have given, Michael, for this discussion. And certainly looking forward to learning more and more from you and from your students, because I believe that reverse mentoring is the only way a person of my generation can survive. So thank you once again.
Well, let me thank you and say the feelings are mutual. I was excited by this opportunity because for me, everything's an educational experience coming from academia. So it's been a great pleasure and a privilege, and I hope we can continue the conversation beyond today.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ganesh.